month we're going to focus on replacing the fuel filler neck that goes into the fuel tank and the hose that goes along with it, as well as installing new clamps on the Acura CL. I have various different other parts here that we're going to replace as well, some that have broken over the years and I was able to secure, and others that just need to be refreshed, and it was just cheaper to get the replacement from the dealership. What's interesting about this fuel filler neck is that there are no directions that I can find on how to replace this, so this will be very interesting. There's one picture in the Acura service book that you can get that talks about this process a little bit, and it's under 11-190 page, which is a fuel supply system, and it's actually within the fuel tank replacement, where it talks about removing a plastic cover to access this. There's some bolts to remove, and then the hose clamps, obviously. But it's not drawn out and simple, so we're going to go through that process together, and we're going to see how simple it is to remove this and replace it, and then do some other various bolts. I always like to start simple by not tackling the biggest project right away, so I always like to mix it up with my projects. We have some simple we have some simple pieces to replace here. One is the cruise control cable holder. There's a little black plastic keeps that go on the core support and allow the cable to run all the way in front of the engine and directly behind the radiator. One of them has broken off, causing the cable to kind of flex, if you will, or whip a little bit as you're driving. It's hardly noticeable, but since it's a simple 50-cent part, we can go ahead and replace that, and that won't take too long. The other thing is we're going to refresh the bolts that go onto the sway bar here. We went ahead a couple months ago and put new bolts on the strut mounts for the struts here. As you can see, these are probably not showing up too well, but they're really new and crisp. So we have these old and rusty ones over in this area that we want to replace as well. So we're going to do that, which are pretty basic hand tools here. So we have a 10 millimeter and a 12 millimeter. The reason for the 12 millimeter is I think one of these was replaced and it's not standard size. Oh, so I was wrong right off the bat. It's not a 10, so these all must be 12s. Yep, so this one's a 12. And you can hear how rusty these are. And we just want to get new ones on there. I always keep my old parts as well. I don't know if other people do that, but I find it easier to just grow all of these within a box and just hold on to them. You never know when you're going to come across the need for them again. So we have 4 new bolts here. What's great about these is that you could clean them up, the existing ones, but when you look at the cost of these and you tack it in with one of your larger orders when you're going to do some replacement parts, it actually just makes sense to buy these new. Probably take you about half hour to clean them all up for when you're just really going to waste a lot of your time for not. So you can see the shiny new bolts are installed here. really brings together the engine bay, I think, at this point. There's very little in the way of rust underneath the engine bay now. We've done a great job of mitigating all of that. New clamps, new bolts, as you can see here, as well as we're working on replacing a lot of the other miscellaneous items within the engine bay. Place to start with this is removing the rear wheel here. Because this car is in storage currently, we have it on casters, so what we're going to have to do here is jack it up, like you normally would, remove the wheel, and then scoot the dolly out of the way, and then support it on its subframe to gain access. Popped the gas door here and looked at what it would take to release it from the top. It's not very clear, so let's start with removing the wheel and see what we can gain access to from underneath. Overly complicated. It looks like we just have an inner fender here and some keeps, like an inner wheel well plastic keeps. Those traditionally break, so if you're going to do this, make sure you have a couple of those on hand. You can see the actual filler neck comes down right here. So let's go ahead and remove this panel and then see what happens, or what we actually have access to from this side. I highly recommend getting one of these pliers. They're really easy, cheap, but basically you just pull on them and then they either break if they're old enough, like this one, or they come out. But either way, it makes pretty quick work of it. Unfortunately, this one, just because of its age, looks like it's just going to fight. And that's pretty typical for these. They don't come out very easily. What you want to do is save the part, like the inner fender part, and just replace these plastic pieces because they always break. So, did a good job of saving the plastic around that one. That one was so broken already it just fell out. And one more here behind, and that one just disintegrated. So there we go. And as you can see here, the reason why we're replacing this is the corrosion. So eventually this would fail anyways on its own, and then you'd be filling the gas tank one day, and it would just pour right out. So what we have to do is release these cables, or release these clamps right here, and just put the new one in. Let's see how much access we actually have in there. We might actually do a whole new setup here with clamps, fresh clamps and everything. We'll have to just see how bad these hoses have swollen. Unfortunately, this is what we get in the Northeast. Wow, this is really bad. Some of this is like ready to go now. So it's a good thing we're doing this. Fortunately, this is why we buy new parts ahead of time, because most of these parts will not come off very easily. they will either break off or they will just seize in, and that will not be good for anybody. So that part's coming out pretty easily. This part looks like it's ready to disintegrate. Yeah, there we go. That is what you get in the Northeast. Things just break off. So, the other thing we have to be mindful of is that we're messing with a fuel line, so it's not like we can just come in here with a torch. We are going to have to exercise some caution, some patience, and probably some innovative techniques to get this done. Honestly, it's probably in our best interest to just snip this off since we know we have new clamps. Now that we've tried to do it the right way, it's likely we're not going to be very successful. So, we're just going to have to snip this off. There we go. I think we're pretty good on this. We can hopefully easily access the removal components here. So what's really difficult here that I might not be able to show very well is actually up here. This filler neck doesn't want to come out of the holder because of this plastic piece and gasket here. So I'm working on getting this disconnected. There's 4 tabs on it, and you got to press in and push out at the same time. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now, removing. It's very difficult to show that angle in there, so just take my word for it that you kind of have to lay on your back and in an awkward position and somehow get some light up there so you can see what you're doing. Now I have the plastic piece kind of completely removed from the car itself. I'm going to have to pull this through. Okay, so the secret to removing this part is actually a bigger screwdriver, ironically. So the screwdriver I was using wasn't giving me enough leverage to get this donut gasket over the filler neck here, and so it was just resisting. Pretty easy once you get it out there. You just kind of remove it like you would remove a tire from a wheel, kind of slowly work your way around the edge of the rim here. If you're going to reuse this, then you probably want to protect it from marring a little bit. I marred up the edge. But all in all, it's basically cleaning this up and then reinstalling it, which should be basically just snapping it back in. So now we're going to have to remove the lower hoses, which should be fun. They'll probably not come off very easily, typical fashion. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to have to remove the hoses. Before we do that, though, let's see if we can get this clearing the car. That way we don't scratch it up any more than what we have to. Does not look like you can easily get it out of the car. The hose is on. Luckily, we are going to replace the hoses, so not overly worried about the hoses. I am worried about the car. Okay. This is kind of where I was hoping we would get it to. And then I think what we're going to do is slowly work our way around with a screwdriver. 2 of the 3 hoses off. What you can see is going on there is that we have a lot of buildup right around the part where the hose connects in. The rust jacking that occurs in the Northeast actually makes it very difficult for hoses to come off once they come on, because the metal swells and then it tightens that rubber up even more. So that's the large problem that we're fighting right here. Okay, it took a little bit of finagling, but we were able to get this fuel filler pipe and the new hoses in. It was a bit difficult, I have to say. It was a lot more difficult than what I thought. I attribute that mostly to the rust and the buildup of decayed metal that was really just cementing into the rubber, causing it to not want to come out easily. Likewise, one of the clamps on the inside of the gas hose there going into the gas tank itself was positioned awkwardly from the factory. I can only assume that it's OEM original, but it was faced in such a way that I couldn't really get a wrench in there. So I've repositioned that with the install so that it faces down, and you can actually snake a 10 millimeter socket wrench extension up there, or use a screwdriver. And essentially what I did was I took the position of the hose clamp that you can see here, but the one that's inside where it connects to the tank, and faced it down. And I would recommend doing that if you're going to go through this project as well. Facing it down allows you to come up from underneath and then use a screwdriver to tighten it, or use a 10 millimeter socket, either which way. So now it's just about buttoning this area up, putting the plastic pieces back on, and we're done. On